E-ink smartwatches, or e-paper watches, have been a very important facet of the e-reader industry for over a decade. Manufacturers from every corner of the globe, from Seiko, Fossil, Epson, and especially Sony, have made e-paper watches that were consumer available for purchase by anybody. But they're all gone now. So what happened? Well, let's take you back on a little bit of a lighter historical on the rise and fall of e-paper watches. To preface this, we're only going to focus on more of the bigger players and not the AliExpress specials that you can find for $20 on Chinese wholesale websites. So with that, let's begin. Back in 2013, Seiko released the Spirit SBPA003 EINK watch. This had an e-paper screen, chargeable solar panels around the bezel, and a real watch band. This unit was essentially the only e-paper watch you could buy at the time, featuring a tiny screen and a few buttons. It was also $700 US a decade ago, so it wasn't cheap. That unit was soon discontinued, but this kicked off the entire subsector of e-paper watches. The industry took a few years off, but things started to accelerate in 2017 with the release of the Sony Fez Watch U. The Sony Fez Watch U was released in 2017 August in Japan. This featured a circular e-ink screen with two rectangular connected screens creating the band. Every part of the surface, both the watch and the watch band and the watch face, were all live, updatable e-paper panels. The unit was all made in Japan and retailed for about $300 US equivalent. Not only that, this came with an accompanying application called the Sony Closet. You could put your designs on your band or even put pictures of your loved ones. The customization was completely up to you. The band came in two different colors, black and white, and several variants were made after the fact, like Marvel versions or other Japanese properties. Surprise to many of you guys watching, yes, this unit is still being sold to this very day and is one of the few that you can still buy in 2024. A few years passed and Sony made more of an economical version called the Fez Watch, dropping the U variant. This was a far more attainable version that was completely connected from band to band and the watch face. However, there was a downside. Although it was half the price, you couldn't load in your own pictures or media, and you only had a few band selections you could cycle through. Again, this unit is being sold to this very day. Sony released yet another e-paper watch called the Smartband Talk 2. This unit featured audio capabilities, beeps and boops, and even voice commands. It was labeled the SWR30 and had a curved e-ink display around a silicone plastic body. You could load in pictures via Bluetooth and do simple things like pedometer, set alarms, etc. This unit as well is being sold to this very day, but is slowly losing support and feeling the effects of time. As 2021 rolled around, this is where the industry started to accelerate, pretty rapidly I might add. The biggest contributor to this acceleration was kicked off by Watchi. Watchi was a lazy, build-it-yourself excuse approach of a product that essentially gave you an exposed PCB, printed circuit board, and a small e-ink screen with a 50-cent canvas strap. From there you piece everything together using double-sided tape and you have an exposed lithium-ion battery pressed up against your wrist all day. This unit is still being sold, but it was a complete flop and didn't garner much of a positive consensus. Also in 2021, Epson, you know, the guys that make printers, released the Smart Canvas. However, this wasn't a smartwatch, it was just a watch. There were no smart capabilities whatsoever. There were no pedometer, thermometer, blood pressure, or anything else. It was just a $600, beautiful, I might add, panel that you can cycle through a few preset backgrounds. It was a beautiful watch and is still one of the best in its category, but the overall limited functionality hurt it to the nth degree. Also in 2021, Fossil Hybrid HR got released. This is where we really started to see true e-ink smartwatch technology come out. It had a circular e-paper display that was actually utilized as a backdrop. In front of the backdrop featured two real mechanical watch hands. This also featured removable and replaceable bands, everything from silicone to aluminum and stainless steel. This featured a glow light, Bluetooth compatibility, and things like heart rate monitors and other features you could link up to your phone's application. It was pretty much the most extensive actual EINK smartwatch made ever. A year later in 2022, the child company of Fossil, called Scogan from Denmark, released a white label hybrid HR smartwatch as well. This was the exact same thing, however relied on more brand loyalty than anything else, as it offered nothing different from its parent company's version. There are a few exclusive covers that you could only get with Scogan, but outside of that, it was entirely identical. That same year, the Gligo was released with the Gligo 2-year battery EINK smartwatch. This was really pushing smartwatches to the limit. The Gligo was released on several platforms and featured an e-paper circular screen. It did technically have a 2-year battery. Unfortunately, it was a result of false advertisement to the degree of that the 2-year battery only referred to the quartz movement of the mechanical hands and not the e-paper screen itself. The e-paper screen itself consumed normal battery life that you had to charge regularly. It was a cheap and cheerful release that kinda came out of left field, as the brand was unrecognized to say the least. In 2022 as well, towards the end of the year, Fossil followed up the hybrid HR with the Fossil Gen 6. This was more of a revised and cleaned up version of the hybrid HR and featured better materials, better quality, and more updated application experiences. However, this was the last EINK smartwatch that the company would ever make, as they have discontinued that division of their consumer product lineup. 2023 rolled around and we saw yet another curveball, all pun intended, with the curved EINK business watch called Bernie. This had a stainless steel body, mineral glass cover, and a leather strap. But to our disappointment, subjectively of course, this is not a smartwatch, and instead was simply an e-paper watch that had time, some light alarms, and that's it. No app, no Bluetooth, no Wi-Fi. There was nothing else to this, as simplicity was the name of the game behind the marketing of this unit. There was no follow-up and no other products from the company other than this one. It was a quick in and out kind of product near the end of the EINK watch lifespan. Finally, the latest release brings us into 2024 with the Radware. Radware was a Geiger counter utilized to detect nuclear radiation. Yeah, you actually did hear that correctly. This is a small EINK watch with no pedometer, no blood pressure, no heart rate, nothing, but instead a Geiger counter. If you get close to a certain type of electromagnetic radiation, this will detect it to some degree in terms of the amount of sieverts coming off of said radiation. Although the Geiger counter itself was functional and did as advertised, the unit was built poorly out of low-quality plastics and non-removable bands. And that's it. In terms of the major players in the game, as we've prefaced this video with, there are no other e-paper watches left on the market, and in the 10-year span of companies trying to make them work has ended. Of course, this is not a definitive diagnosis of this type of product. There very well may and will be other releases of e-paper watches in the future, but the fact remains that it seems that they are finished. We've seen devices outside of actual e-paper technology, like the Xiaomi ImiLab, the Mudita Vegan Watch, Garmin VivoFit, and Garmin Instinct with their MIP technology, and even the Pebble. But none of those are actual e-paper / e-ink, instead are listed as e-paper alternatives. This seems to be the end of the road, due to the research and market consensus, is that e-paper watches have had their time in the sun, but the decade has come to a close, and this marks the end and the rise and fall of e-paper watches.